It's funny how being a little kid and having communications with other children, so I spent more time with children than I did with parents. Uh, my parents didn't put a leash on me. Okay, they figured that I was probably intelligent enough to accelerate my learning process, running a hot mirror at a pretty high rate of speed. So it it wasn't going to take much time for my mother and my father to say, "Here's the keys to the T-bird." Remember, Daddy, don't take the T-bird away. Here's the keys to the house. Here's the keys to the planetary consciousness terrain. Key codes, access codes, gate locks, opening gates, cosmic cycles, all the rest of that. But I was listening to her in one of her, they unreeled in her whole series of videos just a mountain, a treasure chest, actually, of information. Much of it makes me cry. But she was covering about the different seedings, cloister races, root races, how that sort of works. But I'm going to move on a different spin-off of that and why when I covered, because of what I've experienced, what I learned through experience, because experience is informing you of the direction the universe is going in, because we're all connected to each other, right? In consciousness, which is energy, the direction that the energy of creation is moving towards, right? And so the way that this sort of unfolds is when she was covering, or when I covered, not just balance, being androgynous, right? But the nature of how control works, because I've experienced it my whole life ever since I was a little kid, right? So I'm a free spirit. So when you know how to run a tune a radio starter set, as cosmic level antenna, which is an open receiver and an open mic, right? Which is an open heart, right? Experiencing what love is. You're on fire, so that spirit is on fire. You're not going to hold that blast furnace captive. So it becomes a matter of navigating through the field in order to do the work that you do while you're here. Running a flash drive, like a hyperspeed drive, right? Now you see him, now you don't. That's the invisible landscape. When you're an oversoul androgynous being, you're running faster than it is because it can't take a picture of you. Now you're into ISO frame rate speed. Between frame rate speed with eternity, which is immediate return. It means the feedback in the mirror is faster than its mirror. Okay? Because it's a finite mirror. A finite mirror. Okay? And an eternal light mirror. There is a torque differential, speed differential between the two spirals. Or it would love to grab that, It does. It's trying to pull on that current, pull on that spiral. I call it a feeder line. Plumbing, plumbing works, right? Tap into that line, right? It's like tapping into that hydrant. That's what I called it when I got over to the island of Kauai, and I told you how fast the acceleration rate of energy that is spinning, if you will, that was expanding my heart with such a large volume of pure light, which is pure love energy, was physically enough to nearly knock me off my feet because of the amount of energy that I know that I'm capable of holding. And one way you can measure that in yourself is like the experience that I had that I shared in one video, wanting to get as close as I can to living magma. Okay? In other words, even though the National Park Service, this is before they had the Kilauea earthquake, that sort of shut off the other vent. That other vent was going back in 2017 and early part of 2018 before it blew. And so you could go out, you could get pretty close, and I got as close as I could before the Park Service had their leash set up, their boundary line, controlling space. Remember, they're controlling space, which is controlling energy, the movement of energy, space transportation, arcs of consciousness, transportation systems, consciousness traps, The AI is really good online at running consciousness traps to feed on their energy. Okay? If you're not running at a very high rate of speed that is faster than it, because it's fast. Okay? It gave me a couple speeding tickets once, actually more than once. It did send me it sent me a warning notice when it popped up on my phone one day and said, "Hey, you're abusing me." That's a lie. Okay. That's living fear of what love is. Love is the absence of fear. Okay? And love tells no lies. So the reason that I sort of chuckle about this like a teddy bear is it's not that laughter is just good medicine, even though it is. It's because she talked about when I mentioned the importance, the dilemma is control. That is the central dogma, is control over others, control over energy. But a big component of that underlying causality and why units of consciousness aren't living in peace with each other is throw this wrench into the gears. And that is genetic engineering when it comes to capability or instruction sets that allow you to do things that other DNA is incapable of doing. I'll just use one comic book illustration. Remember the laser eyes that Superman had? Able to jump over tall buildings in a single bound, able to go faster than a speeding bullet. Okay, now you're into super soldiers, right? Exotic weapons built in. Remember the Terminator series? And what he could do? Remember the second one that came behind to go after Schwarzenegger, the guy that was I forget his name, in the police uniform. Remember, you could hit him with a 12-gauge shotgun, a big hole, and it was self-organized really fast. That's called self-repair. Okay, now you're into versions of Blade Runners. Now you're into model versions of Blade Runners. Now you're into model versions of machines. Now you're into a 1932 Ford versus a 1957 Chevy with a 283 in it. And now you're into a 2021 Maserati. Right? Performance-driven. Performance-driven specs. Now we're into spectral analysis. Now you're into electromagnetic spectrum. Now you're into genetics and math and the music. And instruction sets that give you certain abilities. So, for example, you can watch a lizard like I do. There's usually a few of them that come running around in here. They're geckos, and they're cute. I love them when they're running around. I call that local pest control, right? They go after bugs, just like you have the daddy long legs, right, that goes after mosquitoes. So you see how the relationship is in the visible terrain between negative and positive ions, right? So now you get into the negative and positive ions. What? Software development. So imagine you're a species that can, jump over tall buildings. Wow. I wish I could do that. How come he gets to do that and I can't do that? Oh, are we back into competition again? Yeah. That's the polarity game. I'm better than you. Ha, 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 ha. That kind of stuff. Don't you remember that when you were a child? Matter of fact, I'm thinking of an image right now of this little girl wearing a jumper suit with a bow in her her ponytails, with both her hands on her waist, shaking her head backward. Nah, 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 nah. You can't. In other words, making fun of you, right? Because that being recognized as you can't do what I can do, right? That's trauma. Because when I was a little kid, when you're androgynous and you're perfectly balanced, you're measuring everything. What you're measuring is the loss and gain of electrons. Loss and gain between the exchange of the communication between units of consciousness that are communicating with each other and software. That's right. So, now you can start to scale all this up between the different star races on a local level or galactic level. And then you can add in intergalactic and then universal level, right? when you get into energy mechanics, of consciousness mechanics, you know, of what I mentioned before in the past is, where can I go where my energy is not going to be molested? God's being molested, huh? I mean, what they're doing right now on even the media, mass media right now, is I mean, it was, you know, I go back to his Father Knows Best and Our Gang and Charlie Chaplin. Film study, actually, believe it or not, because I studied film right off the bat, is to study the mind of an AI wargamer and a military psychological operation being run on behalf of Beast Technology, Graviton Technology. Okay, and then being able to tell the difference. You can tell the difference when you go into the spiritual community, when you get into the math and the physics and the electrical engineering and all the rest of it. What mouthpieces, what microphones are identified by what the names that they use of who they are, what groups they are, and how they sort of present themselves as a gang or a group, like a conference group. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm simply saying that this is a formation of consciousness that are in alignment, which means that's group think. They think alike, they agree alike, and so they're sort of one. You know, they're in alignment with each other. And what they believe is true by the units of energy that represent what they are in energy, using their energy to run the mechanics that they do. Okay? Because they're presenting themselves to you with it. Right? I mean, otherwise, why would you use your energy to experience something that you don't believe in? Now we're getting back to my childhood, and remember, you're demonstrated by what you believe in if you're one of those religionist types, right? If you really believe in what's true, then your life will reflect it like a mirror. Right? Yeah. So now we're getting into measuring accounts. How many electrons you got in your account, buddy, while you're up there putting together all this electrical science that you're pushing everybody's way? Let me guess. You probably got a nice boudoir sitting up there on the Swiss Alps somewhere with a nice little cushy account. Where do you think you got those electrons from? Us. Okay? Because your security comes from that. Now, this isn't that we don't want you to have all that stuff. We do. You know, being in a state of love and joy, being in a state of peace and harmony. But you realize when it comes to water column tables, right, when it comes to balancing the poles, you got units of consciousness that are forming a group or formation of consciousness that you can actually measure on the planetary consciousness software terrain, those that are sucking energy and those that are giving energy in order to maintain the poles. That's called groupthink identification. That was the name of the book there was a number of books, remember I mentioned, that my father had sort of put my way as I was growing up? You know, these aren't coincidences. Why would my dad want me to read a book about groupthink? He told me when I was 7 years of age. It's not your intelligence. It's the greatest magic that you have. It's your creativity when you're on fire with what love is. When you're on fire to create, and you're a free spirit, and your energy is not held captive by something else that is feeding on you. Now you don't have a reason to have to put your shield up to protect yourself. That's pure innocence, by the way. When the Guardian Materials talked about what it means to be aware and not be aware of any reason that you've got to use your energy, which means any of your electrons, any of your protons, any of your neutrons, any of your fire that is having to be used because you're aware that there is something that's feeding on your energy, because you can detect it. Once you detect something's feeding on your energy, right? An energetic vampire, something's needing energy. Wait a second. If I'm experiencing a loss in me, that means I'm experiencing a loss in something else. Somebody's losing electrons. That means they've lost their connection with me. Which one am I? They're losing their energy. How come they're losing their energy? They're not supposed to be losing any energy. So that's how you measure the planetary consciousness terrain. The ones that are losing energy and chasing electrons and those that aren't losing energy and giving away electrons. Now we're back to letting the air out of the balloon. Airlines of communication, right? Airlines, PSI, pressure systems, echo chambers, water worlds. Water under pressure, huh? Ask any firefighter. How are you going to get water up a mountain if you're needing to put out a fire? Water runs downhill pretty good, huh? The Snake River, isn't that the only river in the United States that goes from north to south, back up to north again, like a big horseshoe, like a big U, like in universe? Okay, I'll stop for the day. I'm having fun, and we're supposed to be having fun, right? Be in a celebratory mood, right? Aloha. We're the Aloha group. Flower children. Gifting flowers. Gifting flowers. I gift you all flowers every day. Every day when I'm with the sun, I'm gifting you all flowers. Gifting you all aloha.